Hi guys, right, I'm live again. Hello. Sorry it's been a little while. We had a bit of a storm here last week in Perth, and I actually found out from a friend in Seattle that it made news over there in the States. It's about the only time I think Perth has ever been on the news for anything ever. Ever, really? Yeah, so that was pretty exciting. It wasn't really that bad. It did make, like, a lot of power went out here and there and things were a bit spotty and stuff, and the internet was pretty rubbish, and it blew crap all over the place. So I went out the next day and spent quite a lot of time clearing up the outdoor area, the garden and the patio and the driveway and all that, and brushing all the leaves out of the way, and then and the next day it pissed it down again and gale force winds and blew crap all over again. It completely wasted about 2 hours.
That's worth it.
But anyway, yeah, so that's why there wasn't one last week, so sorry about that. So this time we're going to do something, we're going to do another reading from Don't Need the Whole Dog, which is book number 2, and I got some good ones. I will get straight into it. I'm not going to waffle too much because that's boring anyway for you guys, so I'm going to go straight into it in a few seconds.
Sorry, there's a peg right behind your head.
I've just been informed by Rue that there's a peg right behind. Oh, yeah, it kind of looks like a dick.
Yeah, this is right. Yeah.
A unicorn horn. We'll call it, yes. I'm horny.
There you go. Now you're good. So profesh, so profesh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Spared no expense. Spared no expense. Anyway, yeah, I've been sort of thinking about what stories to tell you. So I was gonna. There's quite a lot of different stuff in this book before I actually get to Thailand, which is the second half of it. So next week I'll do some Thailand stories. This week, last few bits pre-Thailand. So I was gonna do one of the bits about me joining the army, and then I realised that quite a lot of my readers have actually been in the army, like for real over there in the States, especially where it's pretty hardcore. And for me, it was very exciting to do the kind of little army stuff I did. But for you guys, you'd just be like, that's just totally rubbish. So anyway, I've got one which not everybody will have participated in this kind of experience. So apologies in advance to Mum if you're watching. You probably don't want to watch this one. Because this is about sailing.
Oh no.
So, yeah.
No.
So yeah, bless her. My mum doesn't really like hearing about the stories where I come close to dying.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Which, yeah, that's understandable. That is understandable. But the trouble is that most of my stories involve something like that, because I'm pretty clumsy and accident prone, and just bad shit just happens to me. I don't know why. It's not my fault. Well, sometimes it's my fault. Well, most of the time it's my fault. But sometimes it's not my fault. And this was one of those times it was not my fault. I don't think. Well, this bit of it wasn't my fault. Anyway, right, so I don't probably need to give you much information about it beforehand to make it make sense, except that I was looking for work in all sorts of different things. I wanted to do something adventurous, and I did a course in sailing and then managed to get a job delivering yachts. And as you know, they took a chance on me. I've got the gift of the gab, in case you haven't noticed. I can sort of give it a bit of that, so I must have talked them into it somehow. So a whole flotilla of boats set sail, a fleet that was like a rental fleet, and they were boats for charter, and they were leaving Poole Harbour in the UK and going to Lanzarote. There's at least 10 of them, and most of the rest of them had already buggered off by the time I got there. And met my crew, 2 older blokes called Tony and Jeff. Tony was the skipper and Jeff was his first mate, and they were very experienced. They'd done a lot of yachting together, and I think Jeff actually solo crossed the Atlantic in a boat he built himself.
Wow.
And that was his first sailing experience. So these guys weren't mucking about, you know, these were serious guys. They knew what they were on about. So I was quite thrilled to have met up with these guys. They were really nice as well. And we had a dry boat policy according to the company. There was supposed to be no booze on board for any of us, so we ended up with just we only bought 1 beer per man per day, just to give us something to look forward to, and a bottle of wine for each waypoint, of which there were about 5, and then a bottle of spirits each, just for a nightcap. So we had, something like that. It was just 2 weeks we were going to be at sea. I think we spent half of the food budget on booze.
Oh my god.
So anyway, right, so I'll get straight to it. And if I get through this, there's one chapter, there's another little chapter off the back of it, which is quite good. If I get through all that, and we haven't been on too long, I've actually got one of the chapters which I never published to cut out the book, and I've never... it's not even been on. I haven't put it on the blog. I haven't edited it. I haven't done anything with it. But I was reading it with a view to putting it into one of these missing chapters books that I'm making and sending out and that. And it killed me. It was really good. Well, it wasn't really good. It was a memory that was very funny. And so I was like, I'd love to. I really wanted that to be. Anyway, I'll talk about that later. So we'll start with the sailing stuff. My God, I'm full of shit today. Can you tell I've been drinking coffee all day?
It's okay, because Dale says he's trying to put his baby down to sleep, so the sound of your droning voice...
The sound of my droning voice. All right, yeah, cheers, mate. Appreciate that. Thanks. Wait till I start swearing, shrieking.
For the babies.
It's all right, he's only a little one. Okay, here we go, guys. So, that sinking feeling. It gives you a clue there, doesn't it, really? Spoiler alert. We were all loaded up and inspected by late afternoon, so we motored out of the harbour and set sail for Lanzarote. The weather forecast had been blustery conditions, which, let's face it, could mean anything, and our trusty skipper thought this would be ideal for my first proper sail. Trusting the forecast, as you must at sea, we hoisted the sails, keeping them small and under plenty of tension to help me keep control. Tony, the skipper, watched me at the wheel, imparting tips on how to read the sails, how to correct the course when they started to flap, or ease off on our heading if the boat leaned too far over. It was an exhilarating experience, though not always a pleasant one. Bumbling around the Caribbean with the sun high overhead, chicks in bikinis sunbathing on the deck, chilled cocktails in a pitcher of ice, that is what I think about when someone mentions sailing. Or I did until this moment. Now I know it for what it really is. Freezing spray coating your face, chill wind whipping at it, 3 layers of clothes, thermals and waterproofs, struggling against the odds to keep your body warm and dry, and, most of the time, failing miserably. The boat heeled, leaning, well over so that standing upright is impossible. One bent leg takes your weight and soon starts to burn with the effort, but there could be no relief for it while your turn at steering lasts. We were flying along. The sails would snap taut and the boat would lean deeper, leaping forward like the hand of God had grabbed a hold and was yanking us towards him. Then Tony would grunt and nudge my arm. I'd ease the wheel a smidgen and the boat would slow and sit upright again, responding instantly to the slightest touch. It was magic. As darkness fell and my confidence grew, we sailed out of the protective shadow of the Isle of Wight into the middle of the English Channel, right into the teeth of a force 9 gale. There's a scale for measuring the destructive power of wind called the Beaufort scale. It starts at 1, with something akin to a silent fart, and builds up potency as the numbers get higher. It only goes as high as 12, which I'm pretty sure represents the extinction of all life on the planet. So our force 9 gale, or strong gale, as they call it, was quite something. On land, it would be uprooting small trees and breaking branches off bigger ones. At sea, with nothing in the way to slow it down, it was insane. Massive waves crashed over the boat, drenching us all as we crouched in the cockpit. Tony recognised the danger and called out to Jeff, "We've got to get the mainsail down!" I could hardly believe he was serious. Lowering the sail meant climbing forward along the roof of the boat, right up to the mast, then wrestling with ropes and levers in some form of coordinated effort with someone in the cockpit. It was dark. The sky was pitch black, the only illumination coming from the glow of our compass and a tiny signal light atop the mast. The boat was plunging into waves now, rising and falling like the chest of someone having a seizure. We were all fastened to it by straps and harnesses and chunky metal clips. Going outside of the cockpit had to be suicide. But that's exactly what Tony was proposing. Jeff moved around and started doing things with ropes and levers. Suddenly it occurred to me that, whilst this blatantly impossible task was being attempted, I would be left on my own to steer the boat. A wave slammed into us from the side, ripping the wheel out of my hands and slewing the boat around in its wake. "No!" Tony called. "Keep her steady!" I gritted my teeth and clung to the wheel, hauling it around against the pressure of the water. The boat leaned over again as more waves crashed over the bow. I was soaked to the skin already and shivering with the cold, but neither Jeff or Tony seemed to the least bit fazed by it. "What do I do?" I called out. "Just keep her steady." "But how? The waves are—" I was cut off by another pounding and threw all my force onto the wheel to keep the boat from spinning away again. "Every wave just pushes us round sideways." "Yes, so just keep her steady." Keep her steady? For how long?" I had the wheel in a death grip by this point, straining against the wave action with all the tension my body could muster. "Yes, just like that. You're doing great," said Tony. He must have been talking to someone else, because I was not doing great. Waves smashed into us, flooding the cockpit as it heaved to and fro. The gigantic mainsail flogged and flapped, then caught the wind again and snapped straight against its ropes. The boat lurched forward, ploughing nose deep into another wave, before leaning back as we sailed up the face of it. I could see sky, almost as black as the water. Then we levelled out and teetered on the top of the wave before crashing back down into the trough behind it. Clunks and crashes came from below. I could imagine lockers shaking open and spilling pots and pans everywhere like an earthquake in a kitchen. "Sorry!" I screamed, and considered adding, "Help!" The wheel went loose in my grip, losing all tension as the boat came upright. Then in a split second it span, nearly breaking the fingers I'd curled around its spokes for extra leverage. As the wheel span, so too did the boat, bringing the beam holding the bottom of the sail slamming across from right to left with unprecedented violence. The sail gave two great flaps, then filled again, and we lurched forwards. Or was it backwards now? The next wave in sequence lifted us, soaking me as it broke across our bow, and the wheel strained against my grip as I hauled on it with all my strength. My arms were about to come out of their sockets, my legs were struggling to keep me upright, and every time I dared to open my eyes, the sea filled them with salt water. The sail flapped and flogged again, and Tony yelled at me to point up. I didn't have a bloody clue what that meant, so I steered back into the waves and fought the wheel to keep us there. Jeff was hauling himself around the cockpit, releasing some ropes and tightening others. Tony had long since left the safety of the cockpit, fastening his harness to a rail and climbing hand over hand along it towards the mast. Then the mainsail started to come down, and the effect was instant. The wheel slackened off, the flapping noise returned with a vengeance, and Tony grabbed the loosened sail and pulled it down, folding it back and forth across the horizontal boom to which it was still attached. He made it seem entirely normal that he was out there, folding a massive sheet of canvas in the middle of a hurricane like my mum folds shirts in our front room. Jeff paid out the rope, I manned the helm, and Tony tied the sail down with a load of long-coloured streamers. Then he was back to take the wheel, and I was more than happy to relinquish it. Except my hand wouldn't let go. Between the cold, the tension, and the stress, they'd seized up on the wheel and needed prying loose. "You did great," he told me as I wrapped my uncooperative mitts around the nearest fixed object. "Shit, man, that was crazy. I thought I was going to kill us all." "Oh, of course not. That bit went perfectly. Bit windy, though." "A bit? I thought I was going to be blown overboard. I nearly wet myself." I shook my head, showering water around the cockpit. "Not that you'd be able to tell. Thank God I was fastened to the boat." "Oh, yeah." Tony took the loose end of his harness strap and clipped it to a ring built into the deck.
Jesus.
"We call them murder lines," he shouted. "What?" The wind was stealing our words, so I strained closer to hear what he was telling me. He tugged on his strap, checking it was secure. "They've got to be long enough to let you move around the boat, right?" "Yeah." "So they're just long enough to let you fall in the water. You get pulled along behind the boat at whatever speed it's doing." He pointed at the electronic speedometer mounted beside the hatch that led downstairs. It glowed 12 in the darkness. "They reckon no man alive can pull himself out of the water if the speed you're doing is more than 5 knots. You just get dragged along upside down until someone thinks to stop the boat and come and get you. So if you're on your own, well, you drown." "Oh. So when you start doing solo watches at night," he said, "don't fall in." For once, he didn't look like he was joking. Not even a little bit. The storm got worse. Both Tony and Jeff took turns battling the elements, but all of us were struggling. The two men had tried to reduce the size of our one remaining sail, which was designed to roll up like a window blind. Unfortunately, it had jammed, and I had to agree with Tony when he said, "This isn't the best weather for going out there and fiddling with it." No shit. I was dreading my next turn at the wheel. "Jesus, Jeff, I don't think I can do this. What if I sink us?" "Ha!" Jeff's laugh was like a bark. "Boats don't sink." "You've never been on a boat with me then," I wanted to tell him, but a mouthful of sea spray made me choke instead. "Here, take over," he said. "I've got to see how Tony's doing with that position." Tony had been downstairs for a while, trying to get a fix on our location and plot the rest of the night's sail. It was probably taking so long because he was being thrown around in the cabin like a rag doll. I don't know about this, Jeff. If you hear me scream, it's because we're sinking. Huh! Jeff was more amused than ever at the panic in my voice. We won't be sinking. There was a shout from below. Jeff! Uh-oh, looks like the skipper needs me, Jeff said. He winked to me. You'll be fine, right? And he ducked down into the boat. This was not going well at all. I wrapped my hands round the icy steel spokes of the wheel and peered through the rain at the horizon. Oh, fuck! I could just make out the shape of the wave ahead, a black edge against the grey dark, and either we were pointing down into it or else it was towering above us. Whichever way, it wasn't likely to be good news. Hold on! I shouted, though there was zero chance of anyone hearing. Up we rose, the nose pointing skyward, the deck shaking beneath my feet. I clung to the wheel like a lifeline, white-knuckled in the deluge of rain and spray as the boat climbed like a rocket after takeoff. Again we righted atop the wave. The wheel loosened, and I had the terrible thought that we would swing sideways, rolling down the back of the wave like a barrel and ending up upside down at the bottom of it. I wrenched on the wheel, swinging the nose back to make a right angle with the wave, but it was only an instant before we crashed down its backside, slicing an angle across it rather than shooting straight down vertically. My heart, which had stopped at the top, beat about 1,000 times before we came to the bottom. Our angle by then had slipped back. I was losing my struggle for supremacy with the wheel, and it was pulling us parallel to the edge of the waves. Help! I shrieked. Jeff! Help me! There were clunks and clangs from below, and the hatch cracked open. You okay? Jeff called. No! Shit, Jeff! I'm going to kill us! I can't do it! It's going everywhere! Just keep her steady, he boomed, shouting over the deafening crunch of waves and the slap of sail. But... And Jeff was gone, vanishing back inside, sealing the glimmer of light within. The wheel tore at my grip again as the boat heeled over and started to rise. As the next wave lifted us, we were completely broadside to it, and there was nothing I could do. It picked us up, span us completely, and flung us down in less time than it takes to tell. The sails slapped, ropes sang under tension, and I half drowned as water filled the cockpit to knee height. Amazingly, I had the presence of mind to feel bad about the ride I was giving the guys down below. It must have been like a plane crash, with all the lockers spilling baggage and people falling all over the place. The hatch cracked open, and Jeff's head reappeared. You still okay? No! Jeff! Help me! Please help! I'm going to die! I know I am! I'll kill us all, Jeff! Please just help me! I was on the verge of hysterics. No, scratch that. I was hysterical. Tears flowed down my cheeks, unnoticed, because I was soaked to the skin and ankle deep in water that was refilling as fast as it was draining. Shit, Jeff! We're going again! I braced myself against the cockpit seats and dragged on the wheel, fighting to bring our nose around as we rode up the next wave. Jeff scrambled out of the hatch and grabbed the wheel just as we crested the wave, and between us we guided the boat safely down the other side. I'll take it, he said, his huge hands latching onto the wheel either side of mine. They looked strong enough to bend the steel in half, let alone steer it, and now I knew why. It's bad, this, he added, nodding into the weather. Bad. Jeff, I'm fucking scared, man. This is really fucked up. I can't do this. It's not normally this bad. You're doing good, lad, very good. You've kept us afloat. I was gripping the handholds now, concentrating on keeping myself in the boat as Jeff swung us into the next wave. Until then, no one had confirmed it as a possibility. The fury of the sea had terrified me, but the gravity in Jeff's voice brought it home. I had kept us afloat, but barely, meaning there had been a chance that I wouldn't have. Jeff, what the hell is going on? I shouted over the wind and the rain. Oh, it's nothing to worry about, really. But there was a strain in his voice I could hear in spite of the sheeting rain. Jeff? Yeah? What's up? Jeff thought about it as he skillfully slid us down the back of another wave. We're sinking, he said eventually.
Oh my God.
Right then, there was another crash and a string of swear words from below. The light seeping from the hatch went out, and again the call came from below. Jeff! Grab the wheel, lad, he told me, and waited while I took a reluctant grip. You're doing fine. Just point us into the waves. And then he was gone. Again. I'll go straight into the next chapter.
Yeah, definitely.
Can't leave it like that, can I?
No.
R&R, relocate and repair. Looking back on that night, I have no idea how I survived. I guess boats are designed to float and sail, and they're generally pretty good at it. And I had two excellent crew members to help me and guide me. Neither of them did, though, because downstairs our situation had worsened. Tony had gone below to study the navigation charts and figure out where we were. He'd not been down there long when he discovered that the floor was floating. Now in a boat, this is not exactly unheard of. Water gets in there all the time, though not normally enough to fill the bottom right up to the level of the floor. But it can happen, and doesn't exactly spell disaster. Tony just turned on the electric pump and went back to his charts. The pump didn't work. That was the first problem. When Joff went down there helping him and me at the wheel turning the boat into a roller coaster ride, he had quickly established that the pump was knackered. This was more of a problem. But there was a backup. A manual pump operated from the cockpit by a long metal lever. Jeff had scurried up to start that process when I'd had my first meltdown, and he'd taken the wheel to give me the chance to calm down. Then the lights went out, and suddenly we had a real problem, because all the rest of the electrics had failed with them. That was when Jeff had vanished for the second time. Now, I was about ready to call it a night. I think the only reason I hadn't already shit myself was that I was in shock. The horror of the task I was trying to achieve to keep us afloat and alive when our whole environment wanted the opposite was driving me to desperation. I clung to the wheel and fought, and yelled, and swore, and slid around the cockpit like it was lined with grease. The rain beat down, or occasionally up, depending on how far into the sky our nose was pointing, and waves crashed over the deck with such ferocity that all I could do was put my head down, hang on, and let the water pummel me. In fairness, it can't have been much fun downstairs, in the pitch black, ankle deep in seawater, fiddling with electrical connections whilst falling all over the place. When the skipper and the first mate emerged, they were wearing most of our pasta. The electrics were shot. Jeff manned the pump, while Tony took over the wheel, still praising my efforts, but with a terse, subdued voice. He altered course, guiding us out of the worst of the storm and into calmer waters. "We're turning back," he told me. "Are we going home?" I couldn't disguise the hope in my voice. To Portsmouth, I mean." Tony's reply was somewhat grimmer than I'd hoped. "No, we won't make it." "Oh?" "We're heading into Poole Harbour. It's a lot closer. We should be able to manage that." Which was reassuring. "What went wrong? Is the storm too bad?" "No, we can sail in that. It gets a lot worse at sea." That wasn't something I wanted to hear. "But the real problem is, I think we have a split in our skin fittings." "A what? In the what?" "Tony, are you telling me there's a hole in the boat?" Jeff was perched... "No, I mean it's like..." He sighed. "Yes, there's a hole in the boat." Jeff was perched on the back of the cockpit, working the lever back and forth with all his might. "And we've lost our main pump," he added. "Oh, that is bad, right?" "It's not great, lad. And what's worse is this one just stopped working as well." Tony looked back at him. There was no humour in that stare. Joff wiggled the lever up and down to demonstrate. There was no resistance to it, as though it was connected to nothing. "It was working, but now it must have got blocked." I was a pace behind their thoughts, as all this was still new to me. "Will we still make Poole?" I asked. "Yes, we'll make it. We have to." There was steel in Tony's eyes and in his voice, which was good, as I was shaking like a jelly. We limped into Poole, our engine shuddering, our one sail pulled defiantly taut, and navigated between a series of red and green beacons all the way into the harbour. I was sailing again by this point, although I'd spent most of the last 2 hours in my cabin, feeling like I wanted to die. Once the shock of sailing alone into the storm had worn off, my stomach realised it didn't know which way was up anymore, and I'd lost everything I'd eaten since breakfast down the marine toilet, which for some reason is known as the heads. I had to make room to be sick. The toilet bowl was already full of spaghetti, which had originated in the kitchen cupboard opposite. A couple of hours had been enough to get my guts under control, though, and I was so eager to see land again that even the biting cold couldn't keep me from being up on deck. The red and green guidance lights were a mystery to me. Being colourblind was proving more of a handicap than I'd expected. But for now I didn't care. I wanted light, I wanted warmth. Oh man, I wanted warmth. And I wanted food, and I wanted sleep. And I wanted never, ever to set foot on a boat again as long as I lived. We motored in past ranks of gleaming white yachts, all packed tightly together as though they were stopping each other from falling over. Navigating the narrow lanes of clear water between the other boats was not made any easier by having a sail still up and flapping around, but my expert crewmates were up to the challenge. We moored up, itself a tricky procedure in such a crowded harbour, jumped off the boat and made straight for the pub. I needed the Dutch courage of a stiff drink or two inside me when I figured out how to tell the guys that I was leaving, because my regular courage was all used up. My confidence was gone. I was dreading telling Tony and Jeff, as they'd impressed me so much in such a short time. I already considered them more than friends. They were mentors and guardians. They'd saved my life. They were heroes. And I was going to thank them and apologise and then run screaming for the hills. But how to do it? I was 25 now, and I'd been judged a man by the toughest standards I cared to experience. I'd been to Ecuador and wrestled wild animals. I'd been deemed praiseworthy by the world's toughest midget. I was supposed to be strong and confident, the master of my own destiny. Yep, the way I saw it, there was only one thing I could do. Call my mum. She'd know what to say, how to handle the guys, and how to let them down not lightly, because no matter what happened, I was not getting back on that boat. Later, back on the boat, I reflected on one of my deeper character flaws. I'm bloody useless when it comes to getting my own way. I could face down all kinds of scary creatures and had almost unhealthy desires to do things which were bound to cause me injury sooner or later, but I was a complete coward when it came to confronting people. I still felt the need for their approval, hungered for it even. I couldn't face the thought of anyone being disappointed with me, and I couldn't, for the life of me, say no. A few drinks is all it had taken. In front of the guys I'd laid my fears bare, whilst cunningly pretending they were my mother's fears to avoid looking weak and pathetic as I felt. I painted a picture of a terrified parent who was convinced her only son was bound for a watery grave. The tactic had seemed perfect when I conceived it on the phone, with one ear listening to my dear old mum express exactly that concern. But when I presented this argument to my salty sea dog companions, it didn't take them long to find the crack in the dam of my logic. "You're what, 25? asked the skipper. "Man up. Tell her to get over it. You're a sailor now." And that was that. Bollocks. By midday the next day, an emergency team from Sunsail had arrived to restore our yacht to seaworthiness. Bloody well hoped they would do it by night, do it right. If I came any closer to death this time, well, I'd be dead. And that would really piss my mum off. I'd imagined a titanic hole in the side of the boat, the kind of damage Jaws might have done for shits and giggles. Alas, I was to be disappointed. There was no need to bring in some epic crane to haul the boat out of the water and reveal shattered planking and tooth marks that would have Steven Spielberg reaching for his typewriter. Although, to my delight, one of the engineers did utter the phrase, "You were lucky." You have to appreciate the glass's half-fulliness of that statement. 10 boats set sail for Lanzarote that morning, and we got the only one that sank. This did not make me feel particularly lucky. We'd survived because 2 of our 3 crew knew what the hell they were doing, and the 3rd one was stupid enough to do it anyway. The team wasted no time in identifying our problem. "What's the problem?" the lead engineer asked. "The boat's full of water," Tony had replied. "Oh, shit," said the engineer. They discovered that the water was getting in somewhere above the front cabin by the simple tactic of opening the door to the front cabin and causing a miniature tsunami. Everything in there was soaked through, which made me glad we'd only stored our spare stuff in there. Things like books and magazines that we had no room for in our own berths. All were ruined. Tony was even less impressed that he'd planned on sleeping in there. Now it was looking like him and Jeff would be getting closer than ever. "Well, this water must be coming in somewhere," said the engineer, helpfully. It still sounded to me like there was a bloody big hole in the boat, but this wasn't true. According to this crack team of experts, our problem, when they found it, was merely an unsealed portal in the hull. Portals apparently differ from holes in that they're designed to both open and close, although this particular portal was achieving one of those states considerably better than the other. This was, however, easily remedied with a huge tube of glue. Now I know what you're thinking, but don't worry, this was not just any glue, this was special boat glue. It was around this point I started getting nervous again, because there was a very real possibility that we would be sailing again soon, only now the hole in our boat had been glued shut. I wasn't completely convinced. I was less than thrilled at the prospect of taking any boat out of the sight of land again, especially not one with uncooperative portals. I've seen those adverts where they dangle a man over a shark tank by his jacket, which is stuck fast with super dry and locked tight to a plank. "You can entrust your life to glue," seems to be the message. But then I've also seen an advert where a 50-foot tall squirrel crushes a row of cars, and frankly, I place about the same amount of faith in both of them. So the vast amount of water which had taken us most of the morning to bail out of the boat had, in layman's terms, gone in through an unsealed hatch. The irony being that it was an inspection hatch that had not been sufficiently inspected. Inside the nose of the boat, hereafter called the bow, for fear any sailing types reading this will burst a blood vessel for my disregard for nautical terminology, there was a locker. In this locker was our anchor. It may sound medieval, but this big lump of spiky-ass metal is still the way you get your boat to stay where you put it. It's heavy and slimy and needs to be kept on its own for fear of getting tangled with anything else. Naturally, lockers have lids. Unfortunately, this one had a lid which was about as good at its job as I was. Hence, water had been flooding into this locker every time the bow of the boat dipped underwater. Basically, every time we'd plunged into a gargantuan wave, which was about every 30 seconds. It wasn't my fault, I was reassured to hear. There was no point at all in trying to place the blame in a situation like this, the Sunsail engineers explained, conveniently ignoring the fact that it was their fault. Their report concluded that our primary problem was excessive ingress of water, which, for anyone not familiar with the jargon, means these poor bastards nearly drowned because some idiot forgot to shut this locker. The vast amounts of water sloshing around inside had shorted the electrics, including lights, navigation systems and the all-important pump, which is why they weren't working, and when we turned to the manual pump to replace the electrical one, a bit of floating rubbish had blocked it. A situation that was impossible to remedy in a force 9 gale, under the floor of a boat in total darkness. All that remained was to feel grateful that this particular set of circumstances had arisen and combined to screw with us less than a day out of docks. If it had happened a little later in our trip, like, say, 50 miles off the coast of Africa, I may well have been dictating this book via a medium. "Cheer up, lad," Jeff had said as we'd motored into Poole Harbour last night. "Worse things happen at sea." That's the end of that one. How long have we been on, love? I've got Rue just sitting off to this side for anyone who doesn't know.
Sorry, I'm making noises. I can't help it.
she can't help it. Must be good. So I'll have a slug of water, not pure rum.
Not yet. Oh, mate.
And that was quite a long reading, and this bit, I don't know how long it is because I haven't read it all. So I'll get straight into it, and then we'll just finish it and all go to bed. Sound good? Sorry, I just realised I'm looking at me, not the camera.
It's great.
Modern technology. I'm not very good at this.
You're great.
Okay, yeah, this might be a little bit disconcerting because I'm actually looking behind you guys at my computer monitor, because this story doesn't exist in print form. It's never been printed out. It's not even been proofread.
A secret chapter.
So if I read a typo and it sounds weird, well, you know, that happens. Here we go. So, I'll need to give you a very little brief bit of information about this. So, when I was trying to cut out stuff from this book, because this book was even longer, that bear in my pants was 130,000 words, and I cut it down to 105-ish in the final edit, which is why I've got a load of missing chapters which I've been editing to send around and all that. Donnie the Whole Dog was 150, I think.
Wow.
And then I only managed to cut it down to about 130, so it's already way longer. And according to some people, it feels like it was 5 times as long. But what can you say? So the first thing I did is I cut out one entire section, because this book was a little bit bitty. I did a lot of things on the way to Thailand, like joining the Territorial Army and volunteering in a homeless shelter, doing the sailing adventure, obviously a few other little bits, and they were all like multiple chapters. And there was one set of stories which weren't, they were alright. I thought I liked them. I really liked them. I thought they were quite funny, and it was a particularly weird and crazy experience that I had. But it was just so easy to lift wholesale out of the book with very little effort, because I never really referred to it before or after. I went, I got a job, I did this job for a short period of time, and then I finished, and that was it. So we just went, do you know what? We'll take that like 15 or 20,000 words, and we just got rid of that whole chunk, about 5 or 6 chapters. And I've never done anything with them since. So basically, Toby's girlfriend, Toby from Ecuador, his girlfriend Alice, I was still really good friends with Alice, I have been for many years, and shortly after we got back from Ecuador, she was working there as a teacher. She came back and she carried on teaching English, and then she knew that I was looking for work and we were in touch, and she called me up and said, hey, I've got a job for you. I'm working at an English language summer school and on the south coast, and they need people as activity leaders. And I was like, what does that mean? And she says, honestly, it doesn't matter. They just need people to take these kids and in between their language, these are foreign kids that come over from different countries to learn immersion English in their summer holidays. And in between having like intensive language lessons, I think about 3 hours a day, they spent a few hours a day doing activities, and so they needed activity leaders to run these activities, which you would think would be somebody who had some sort of qualification in that sort of thing. They'd done any form of sport. You know, I don't even know the rules for football, for God's sake. I'm the worst person. I'm absolutely clueless. But I think Alice was remembering the Tony that she'd known in Ecuador, who was sort of chopping down trees with machetes and doing wrestling crocodiles and doing all this crazy shit. And she was like, this is the guy, we'll have him. And she convinced people that they should employ me. As it turned out, it wouldn't have mattered anyway, because the place was such a bunch of shit. They didn't have a frigging clue. And honestly, I don't think anybody could have made that job any better, and probably not a whole lot worse. Anyway, I went to take up this job, and this is the first chapter about me going to get that job. So I'll start right now, and here for the first time in the history of the world is Actually, I just realised I've never censored this. It's
No. Not swearing is... Oh.
No, so okay.
No.
Well, we've got my little eye says there are 10 people watching this, so no bugger's going to know. The language school is called EAC. I think it's still operating, so I hope they don't try and sue me. But it's written all the way throughout this thing, so I won't tell you what it stands for. There we go, compromise. Otherwise, I'd have to keep stopping and going, it's called the Fred Jenkins School for something or other. So, picture me going for a job. I've done the interview by phone. Basically, the interview was the guy, Simon, who was going to be my boss, rang up and said, hey, so, you want a job? And I was like, yes. And he goes, great. Can you come on Monday? So I did. So, it's called A Day in the Sea Life. When I arrived in Portsmouth, there were over a dozen messages on my phone, all from my family and friends ringing to check I was okay. Apparently there'd been some bombs going off in London that day and they were all worried, which was touching but a little weird as I wasn't in London and I hadn't been anywhere near London. Maybe I'd been a bit vague when telling everyone what I was up to. Anyway, the university campus was easy to find, right in the middle of town. I'd made good time. It was only 11:30 in the morning when I knocked on the door to the EAC office and introduced myself to Simon. The fact that it was the EAC office was indicated by a piece of A4 paper taped to the door with the words EAC office printed on it. This should have been my first clue as to what I was getting into, but it has been said that I'm not very observant. It's true. Simon shook hands with his right whilst pushing a contract at me with his left. I scrawled on it, and we shook hands again as he passed me another piece of paper with what looked like my old school timetable on it. You're in luck, he told me. This afternoon there's a class of kids due to make a trip to Brighton to visit the Sea Life Centre. Actually, it's 2 classes. We've had to combine them because we're a bit short of staff. Wow, right into the thick of it. It sounded like a fun trip too. Oh, nice. So you want me to go with them then? Ha ha, yes, of course. Actually, I want you to take them. Suddenly, what he was saying made sense. Horrible, horrible sense. Short-staffed. Activity leader. That meant, the buses will be here at 1, so dump your bags and stick this on. Simon handed me a yellow t-shirt with EAC printed on it unwisely in fluorescent orange. You're living in the university halls of residence right round the corner. Here's a key. You'll share a kitchen and a bathroom down the hall. Sound all right? Yeah. So it's just me on this trip. Oh, the kids' teachers will be with them as well, 1 for each class. But they don't speak much English, and neither do the kids. Make sure they all know when and where you're meeting up if you separate. Oh, Sea Life Centre. It was all moving a bit fast. Oh yes, that's all booked. You just go in. If there's any problems, get them to call me. The coaches will go there first and drop you off and leave you there and come back at 7. And bring you back at 7. 7? Oh yes, and here's some cash. He handed me an envelope full of £20 notes. There's £5 per head in there. Buy them some dinner in Brighton. I met them an hour later. Them was a fairly innocuous term for the seething mass of chaos that roiled around the bus bay. Pushing, joking, shouting, running out into the road, wrestling. The children were a mixture of ages from about 9 to about 15. Half of them were French, and the other half were Russian. And according to the sheet in my hand, there were 80 of them. Roll call was an exercise in futility. Eli Rotjobenix? No answer. Rushcha Ivanovich? Of course, no answer. For starters, it was taking me several minutes to figure out how to pronounce each name. I was 100% certain I was doing it wrong, and no one was listening anyway. The coaches rolled up, and I had to do something before 80-ish young bodies piled onto the buses at random. I cornered two teachers, and showed them the list. There was only one. Neither of them seemed to understand what I was getting at, and by now the coaches were swarming with kids. Thankfully, they'd stuck to their own kind, so without actually doing anything, I'd ended up with a coach full of Russians and a coach full of French. I shrugged. Why fight it? I counted 39 heads on one coach and 41 on the other, so I gave the driver a thumbs up, and off we went. To the Sea Life Centre. Oh, what joy. On the journey there, I stressed enough for 3 lifetimes. Buy them dinner. Buy them dinner? Where in 5 shades of shitballs was I supposed to buy dinner for 80 kids? With no booking, no warning at all of our coming, not even the name and location of a likely restaurant. I'd never been to Brighton before, and all things being equal, I'd have preferred to keep it that way. I led my kids into the Sea Life Centre with the full intention of abandoning them there while I scouted the area for possible food options. This place was famous up and down the country. Surely it would keep them amused while I made some arrangements. There were tanks of fish everywhere, a tunnel to walk through where you were surrounded by fish, interactive exhibits dealing with every conceivable aspect of marine life. And that's when it hit me. Who gives a shit about fish? Me? Normally, yes, but now, not even a little bit. With hindsight, this is a pretty obvious problem. Cast your mind back to when you were, let's say 14 years old. Imagine you were lumped together with your whole high school class and transported to a foreign country to sit at a desk and learn the local language. Then some idiot lets you loose in a seaside resort with a mixed group of foreign students and supervision so minimal it barely qualifies. Would you give a shit about fish? They didn't. Understandably. They strolled past the exhibits with hardly a glance, passed through the amazing glass tunnel and straight out into the gift shop, where they congregated by the exit. Some of the younger kids were interested, faces pressed up against walls of glass, and there was the odd group of teenagers for whom strolling pushed the boundaries of acceptable behaviour. They sort of hung out in little clusters scattered throughout the centre, chatting with folded arms and disgusted expressions, while the crowd at the exit grew uglier. Then came a scream. A French girl of about 10 was waving a hand, clearly distressed, and a young bloke in a Sea Life t-shirt was already scurrying off to get help. "The Requins!" the girl wailed, which meant nothing to me. The closest tank had an open top, and she must have been trying to touch one of its occupants, egged on by a friend who stood shamefaced nearby. I glanced at the sign on the tank. Beneath, "Do not touch," written in several languages. Attilomyceterus marmoratus lived in there, a harmless species of bottom dweller known as a coral shark. Perfect. There was a tiny semicircular cut on the tip of the girl's index finger. As I watched, it wept a single tear of blood before the staff first aider showed up and slapped a plaster on it. By this time, the gift shop was bulging. Some of the kids had spilled out into the car park, and I knew I was a gnat's bollock away from losing them. I had no choice but to march to the front of the group, clap loudly a few times, beckon them to follow me, and walk out of the exit. We'd been in the Sea Life Centre for nearly 15 minutes. Directly opposite, Brighton Pier looked like my salvation. This was the kind of place I could lose the kids for an hour or so. It had amusement arcades, trampolines, other crap, hopefully. In a vast straggle, we marched across the road to it, where I was relieved to find it was free to enter. In we went, up it, down the other side, and back out of it. Obviously, the pier had failed to impress. We'd spent less time in there than we did with the fish. The sun was warm overhead as I led the kids back over the busy road, running backwards and forwards repeatedly to stand in front of cars that seemed intent on running them over. Eventually, we made it to a large pedestrianised area. I was getting desperate. My kids were bored and restless. I had 3 hours to kill and not a clue about how to feed them. Think, Tony. Brighton was famous for 3 reasons that I could think of which there was only one left. Beach? I addressed the milling crowd, trying to sound more confident than I felt. No response. I had a horrible feeling that I was the only person in the whole group who spoke any English. I glanced around the street, seeking inspiration from the endless parade of shops. Sweat ran down my back beneath the garish yellow t-shirt. Shopping? I hazarded. An invisible electric current ran through the crowd. Within moments there was hush. There were more eyes on me than there had been all day. Had I just breached the language barrier? Or had they been holding out on me? The 2 teachers, each striving to be of less use than the other, were stood together with matching scowls. I can't really do this, I thought. Can I? I bloody well could. Excusez-moi, madame, I started. One of the teachers moved closely, presumably the French one. I grappled with a few memories for a second. Rencontre? No. René? No. Rendezvous. How the hell had I forgotten that? Rendezvous ici à 5 heures. Oui, bien, she replied. Well, something similar. All the students were riveted to this exchange. I turned to the Russian teacher, planning a mime. À 5 heures ici, she replied and nodded. Apparently the Russian teacher spoke French. And that was it. A brief burst of instructions in their own language and some vigorous hand-clapping, and the kids melted away in seconds. I was left alone, terrified at what I'd just done, yet pissed off enough to feel righteous. If Simon didn't like it, well, frankly, he could go and fuck himself. Back over the road was a beach cafe with a big fish and chips sign. It was as good a place to start as any. On closer inspection, it proved to be a porter cabin-like structure with one long serving bar all down the beach-facing side. A cheerful-looking, chubby bloke came straight over to me. How much is your fish and chips, mate? $4.50, chief, he replied. Just the one, is it? Funny you should ask, actually. I'm in a bit of trouble. Maybe you can help. I've got 80 kids. Blummin' heck, your missus must be sore. He didn't miss a beat. I was glad of a chuckle. It made everything seem less threatening. Do you know where I can get dinner for 80 kids? Like nearby? Oh, we can sort that out for you. Can't we, Fred? From somewhere in the back, Fred grunted. 80, is it? Don't you worry, lad. What time are you coming by? I couldn't remember being so happy to be called lad. 5-ish? All righty. You want some drinks with that? Cans of Coke? Lemonade? I guess. How much? Oh, we'll chuck 'em in with the grub. $4.50 per head all in. I could have kissed him. I'd have tried, but the counter was too high. It was hard to believe how well the operation went. Smoother than a greased penguin. Fred served, the jolly guy rapped, and I handed out packet after packet of steaming hot, delicious-smelling chips. 2 spotty chicks in white jackets materialised and started handing out cheap fizzy drink cans in 4 colours. Every plastic seat, bench and table was taken. There were kids sitting on the concrete steps down to the beach, kids balancing on steel railings, but the chaos I feared never emerged. About half the kids, mostly girls, were surrounded by carrier bags bearing a wide variety of department store logos. I finally figured it out when I went to the rendezvous. Every kid had been there on time, chattering excitedly, laughing and squealing and pushing. These weren't poor students from impoverished backgrounds. They'd been sent all the way from England, presumably at great expense, to spend their summer studying. These were the sons and daughters of the wealthy elite. They didn't want to learn English, and they didn't want to look at tanks of fish. They were here in England, the beating heart of consumerism, surrounded by Gap and Reebok, River Island and Next, Topshop, Topman, whatever. You get the idea. Their parents might believe they were here to learn, but no. As far as they were concerned, they were here to shop. We rocked up at the university in a fine mood. Even the teachers seemed in high spirits, joining in with occasional songs that started up from the back of the bus, always getting louder and louder and ending in raucous laughter. The kids climbed off the buses, some still singing, and scattered towards their various accommodation blocks. The teachers paused to offer me a cheek to kiss, then chased the last of the kids back towards the office. Simon heard the commotion, came out and watched with an expression bordering on shock. "You managed all right then?" he offered when we were alone. "Yeah, no problems." I handed him back the envelope. "Here's your change." He stared at the cash peeking out of the corner. From the look on his face, I don't think he expected me to come back at all. That gave me a clue as to how desperate things had been. Simon must have had no choice but to send me out and hope for the best. EAC was clearly in trouble. "Thanks for that, Tony," said Simon. His gratitude and his relief sounded genuine. "I'm just closing up for the night. See you in the morning?" "Yep." I started back to my room. "Oh, we did have one small problem," I said as I remembered. Simon froze mid-stride. "Nothing to worry about, though." "Oh, OK then. What happened?" "Well, I don't know if you'll believe me, but while we're at the Sea Life Centre, one of the girls got bitten by a shark." Simon blinked at me. "Really?" "Yep." Oh well. Sounds about right." And there we go, that's it. So that's the end, so I'll leave you there for now. But yes, I am going to edit that one. It's a little bit rough, so I'll sort that out. And the rest of the chapters, there is 5 chapters in that section, and they get stupider as it goes on, because that place was an absolute shit show back then. It might not be now. It might be great if they are still operating.
Mindy wants to know what your T-shirt says.
Oh, sorry. It says, "Can't we all just get along?"
They all want
and
to
it's
along.
it's rock, paper, and scissors. I've got another one actually, which is the rock, paper, and scissors, and the paper, which is the rock, which is being wrapped in paper, is going. That doesn't really hurt. I think is the confusion at the heart of the rock, paper, scissors. Anyway, you guys, bless you. Thank you so much. You've listened to me waffle on for far too long now, I'm sure. So I will let you go, and it's 3 o'clock here, so in the morning. So I'm going to go to bed. Poor Rue. She's struggled to stay awake, sitting there. She's got matchsticks propping her eyes open.
I'm chuckling away.
Anyway, yeah, we're going to hit the sack. So thank you very much, guys.
Stay safe.
Yes, stay safe.
There's a lot going
take
on
care of
in
yourself.
life.
Actually, I will very briefly mention an idea I had the other day, which is unrelated, semi-related to this, because we're coming out of lockdown now, and it's much better for us here in Australia, especially in Perth. We've been very lucky. We've sort of had a nice, easy ride, and I actually have had quite a few emails over the time period of people. Mostly, I ran a big free sale, and a lot of new readers sort of discovered my books through it. And I've had a lot of emails from them, sort of saying that they're really struggling with lockdown. A lot of people.
And now the rioting as well.
Yeah, well, it's getting worse in America certainly, and the situation in a lot of countries is still pretty grim, and a lot of people are getting quite depressed. And I've had a few people saying that they found my books whilst looking at depression books and self-help books and things like that, because I do advertising, and I advertise to sort of all sorts of different non-fiction sort of self-helpy things, because hey, have a chuckle at my books, it's kind of self-help anyway. So a lot of people saying that they're really, really depressed, and that it's nice to have a bit of a laugh, and people have been finding these videos on YouTube and saying they were funny. So it occurred to me that I've got loads and loads of videos and photos, all sorts of really, really stupid stuff from our travels. So I'm going to try and upload as many as I possible, just here and there, no schedule. So every so often, I will just stick a video up of something random. It will be no logical sequence or order. It'll be whatever I find. But everywhere we go, we take videos and we lark around, and we always say, we'll put all these together and we'll make a great big video of our time in Austria or our time in Iceland or something like that. And we've never, ever done a single thing apart from, I think we did about 3 videos from China that we actually bothered to put up on YouTube. And one of them's had 35,000 views, actually. I noticed it was pretty sweet.
The other one was spelled wrong.
Yeah, the other one I spelt it wrong, because it had like 300. But anyway, so I'm going to stick some other videos up. So if you interested at all, keep an eye on my page, and I will just keep flinging these things up randomly, probably starting tomorrow, just because, why not, just for shits and giggles.
Yeah, just improve the mood of the world.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much going on.
Because we've got all that stuff and it's doing nothing, just random raw footage of us basically being dickheads. So why not put it up out there and see if anyone has a chuckle?
Yeah, improve things.
So thank you very much once again, guys. Really appreciate you tuning in. I will be doing this again next week, storms and weather permitting. And in the meantime, look after yourselves and be super careful and stay safe. And hopefully we'll be back here tomorrow and back here next week, and it will all be a much happier place.
Yeah.
See you later, guys. Bye.